The desert wind howled, tearing through the splintered boards of Elias Ward's crumbling ranch house, dragging the sharp, bitter scent of dust and brittle sage. Another day of suffocating silence, another day of endless, unforgiven land sprawling before him, barren, relentless. Then a sound, jarring, unnatural, shattered the stillness. At first Elias mistook it for the groan of his weathered barn door, creaking in the wind, but it came again, low, strained, almost inhuman. A cry. Elias's heart lurched, a cold jolt in his chest. He dropped his bucket, water sloshing onto the cracked, thirsty earth, and squinted toward the corral. The sun blazed mercilessly across the plains, twisting every shadow into something sinister, uncertain. His boots crunched, slow and deliberate, on the parched ground as he moved forward. The sound grew sharper, desperate, raw, clawing at his soul. And then he saw her. Beneath a sagging wooden beam, a woman hung suspended, her wrist bound cruelly above her head. The coarse rope bit into her skin, her body swaying with each shallow, ragged breath. Her dark hair, matted with sweat, clung to her dirt-streaked face. Her torn dress fluttered in the dry, biting gusts, and nearby a shattered chair lay in pieces, the cruel relic of her captor's work. Whoever had strung her up like this hadn't meant for her to survive. Elias froze, his breath caught, trapped in his throat. He was no stranger to hardship, storms that devoured cattle, winters that gnawed at bone. But this was something else, a human being, strung up like livestock, abandoned to die. Her face, though marred by grime, held a fierce, unyielding beauty. And her eyes, God, her eyes, wide with pain, yet blazing with something deeper, something unbroken, a fire that refused to be snuffed out. Lord above, Elias whispered, his voice rough, trembling with shock. Her lips trembled, cracked, bloodied. Help. The word was barely a breath, fragile, but urgent, piercing his heart. That single plea snapped him into motion. He surged forward, yanking the hunting knife from his belt with a trembling hand. His jaw clenched tight as he sawed at the thick hemp, his hands swift but careful. Each tug of the rope made her flinch, her body jerking as the fibers bit deeper into her raw, bleeding wrists. "Hold on," he murmured, his voice low, steady, a lifeline in the chaos. "I've got you. I've got you." With a final, desperate cut, the rope snapped. She collapsed, limp as a rag doll, but Elias caught her, his arm steady before she hit the dirt. Her weight, or lack of it, stunned him. She was so light, her bones sharp beneath her skin, as if hunger had carved her down to nothing but will. He cradled her carefully, his heart pounding like a war drum in his chest. "You're safe now," he said, his voice firm but soft, though a quick glance at the horizon told him otherwise. Whoever had done this could be watching, waiting in the shadows. He carried her into his house, his boots heavy, deliberate on the creaking floorboards, and laid her gently on the narrow cot reserved for weary travelers. She stirred, muttering feverish words in a tongue he didn't know. Her voice haunted like a ghost slipping through his walls. Her eyes fluttered open, locking onto his, first with suspicion sharp and wary, then something softer, a flicker of trust, fragile as a candle in the wind. "Why?" Her voice cracked, raw from thirst, barely audible, each word a struggle. Elias grabbed a tin cup, filling it with water from his canteen. He held it to her lips, steadying her trembling head as she drank greedily, coughing, then sagging back against the thin, worn pillow. "Because no one deserves to hang," he said simply, his voice gruff but thick with kindness, a warmth he hadn't felt in years. Hours passed, slow, heavy hours. The woman slept, though her rest was restless, her murmurs stirring old ghosts in Elias's mind, memories of loss, of choices made in the heat of survival. When she woke again, the firelight danced across her face, casting her features in a warm, flickering glow. Her eyes were clearer now, sharper, alive. "My name is Naomi," she said slowly, her words deliberate, her accent marking her as Apache, a quiet strength in every syllable. "My husband is Chief." Elias's hand froze mid-stir of the pot on the stove. A chief's wife. His stomach twisted, dread sinking like a stone. This wasn't just cruelty, it was a message, a spark meant to ignite war. He turned to her, his face grim, his voice low. "A chief's wife. He will come," Naomi whispered, her voice a haunting blend of warning, an unshakable faith. Elias nodded, but dread coiled tighter in his gut. He'd acted on instinct, cutting her down. But tomorrow would bring consequences. At dawn, the answer roared across the plains. The earth trembled before the sound reached his ears. Deep, rolling thunder, growing louder, closer. Elias's mare snorted, stamping nervously in the corral, her eyes wide with fear. He stepped onto the porch, hand shielding his eyes against the rising sun, the horizon. It churned with motion, riders. 200 Apache warriors surged forward, their painted faces gleaming like fire in the dawn light. Spears and rifles glinted, their horses kicking up a storm of dust that swallowed the plains. They rode in tight formation, a force of nature, unstoppable. Elias's breath locked in his chest. He'd faced bandits, stared down outlaws. But this was an army. Naomi stepped outside, her body frail, but her spirit unbowed. When she saw them, tears welled in her eyes, shimmering with relief, with pride. She raised her scarred wrists, her hand reaching, trembling, toward the leader at the front. The riders slowed, forming a wide, silent circle around the ranch. The air grew thick, heavy with anticipation. A tall man dismounted, his presence commanding, broad-chested eyes like polished steel cutting through the dawn. The Apache chief. He strode to Naomi, sweeping her into a fierce, fleeting embrace, his hands gentle, but his face carved with fury, a storm barely contained. Then he turned to Elias. Every warrior's gaze burned into the rancher, their silence louder than any war cry. The chief studied him, his expression unreadable. Then, in halting English, he spoke. "You cut her down." Elias inclined his head, his voice steady despite the weight of 200 stares. "She'd have died if I hadn't." The chief's eyes narrowed. For a long, agonizing heartbeat, Elias braced for death. But then the man placed a hand over his heart, extending it toward Elias, a gesture that carried the weight of the world. Respect, gratitude. "You saved her," the chief said, his voice low, resonant like the echo of a canyon. "For that, we don't take your land." Elias exhaled, his heart slowing, relief flooding his veins. The warriors dismounted, gathering around Naomi, offering water, blankets, their voices soft but urgent, a family reunited. For a fleeting moment, peace seemed possible on this brutal frontier. But peace here was a fragile thing, as fleeting as a desert rain. That night, as Elias stoked the fire, a shadow flickered near the barn. His instincts flared, sharp, cold like a blade against his spine. He stepped outside, hand gripping his rifle. The moonlight bathing the plains in silver. There, in the ghostly glow, he saw him, a wiry figure with a jagged scar across his cheek, eyes glinting with venom. One of the outlaws. who'd strung Naeli up to die. You shouldn't have cut her down, old man, the bandit hissed, his voice dripping with malice, each word a poisoned dart. She was meant to break the chief. Now you've made yourself their ally and our enemy. From the darkness, the more figures emerged, their rifles catching the moonlight, cold, glinting death. Bandits, hungry for chaos, desperate to spark a war between settlers and Apache, using Naeli as their pawn. Elias's stomach knotted, fear and resolve warring in his chest. If the warriors thought he'd betrayed them, his land would run red by sunrise. "You'll not take her again," he growled, stepping forward, his voice steady as stone. The outlaw sneered, his lip curling like a snake. "Watch us." A gun cocked, its metallic click slicing through the night like a guillotine. But before the shot could ring out, a sharp whistle split the air. The ground shook once more. The warriors had returned faster than Elias could have dreamed. In moments, 200 Apache riders thundered around the barn, cutting off every escape, their silhouettes looming like avenging spirits in the moonlight. The chief rode forward, his gaze locking onto the outlaw with lethal precision. "You strung my wife to die," he said, his voice a low, chilling promise, each word heavy with retribution. The bandit faltered, his bravado crumbling like dry earth. "It wasn't me, it was him," he stammered, pointing at Elias, clawing for survival. "The rancher's lying, His lie choked off as Naeli stepped into the moonlight, her presence fierce despite her frailty. "No," she said, her voice ringing like fire across the silence, unwavering, unbreakable. "This man saved me. He cut me down when you would have left me to hang." The warriors erupted, their shouts shaking the night like thunder. The outlaws scrambled to flee, but they were dragged down, their weapons torn away, their lies laid bare. The chief dismounted, his steps deliberate as he approached Elias once more. "You risked your life for her," he said, his voice steady but heavy with meaning. "A bond forged in blood and mercy. And now, you are not alone. You have our respect, our watch." Elias nodded, the weight lifted from his chest, replaced by something new, something warm, unfamiliar. For years he'd been a solitary man on a dying patch of land. Now, for the first time, he felt bound to something greater. Naeli stepped closer, her eyes soft in the firelight, brimming with gratitude, with something deeper. "You gave me back my life," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion, raw and real. "And I will never forget." The ranch was no longer silent. It pulsed with hope, guarded by warriors, bound by the memory of rope and mercy. And that's where we'll leave Elias, Naeli, and the warriors for now. But trust me, this story's far from over. On the frontier, peace is as fleeting as a desert breeze, and every choice echoes louder than the gunfire. What would you have done? Cut her down, or walked away? If you're itching to know what happens when enemies return for vengeance, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and share your thoughts in the comments below, because on these plains, every decision carves a new chapter.